this is one of those things where I don't need to tell you there's inflation. Everyone who's bought eggs knows there's inflation. Everyone who's gone out to dinner knows there's inflation. It sucks. What are the actual numbers? 3.1 year over year now, 3.1%. For those keeping track, since 2020, if you add it all up, essentially you're 17% poorer. The inflation in your life is 17% higher than it was just 3 years ago. We all have a lower standard of living today than we did 3 years ago, and that kind of sucks, does it not? So when does this end? Is it going to end? Is it going to get worse? Let's ask an expert about it. Joining me now, Carrie Sheffield, Senior Policy Analyst for the Independent Women's Forum, also author of the book Motorhome Prophecies. Okay, Carrie, inflation's bad. That's not exactly breaking news to anyone who buys things, but why is it so bad?
Well, a big answer is government spending. So as we know, government spending crowds out productive spending. And if you look at the cumulative hiring among all the sectors, so if you're talking about manufacturing, healthcare, things where we actually are making things or producing real products and real services in the private economy, every single job creating sector is overshadowed by government hiring. That means government is the number one employer here this year. And that is a bad thing because not only is it fake numbers and fake jobs, I call it like a Popkamin village. It's a fake Russian village used as a facade because now Joe Biden's crowing about all these great employment numbers. Well, that's actually fake because it's not real jobs. These are jobs that are being used and paid for by taxpayers, and they're not being even paid off today. They're going to be paid on the backs of our children and our children's children.
Tell me about these fake jobs, Carrie. This is news to a lot of Americans. It certainly reminds me of the old FDR New Deal days where we were essentially paying people to shovel out a ditch and then paying them to shovel it back in. Is that what we're doing now?
Well, it is. It's been now in the form of the Green New Deal. So it's very interesting that you picked up on it. That's exactly what it is. It's the 2.0 version of it. And that was a major component of the bill that was signed into law by Joe Biden and rammed through by the Democrats with Joe Manchin's help. I think it's no surprise that Joe Manchin is retiring because people are furious that he caved. And he also didn't even get what he wanted in return. He was promised things by the Democrats in order for him to sign on to that. Well, guess what? They didn't deliver. And so he's resigning in shame, or he's not going to run for re-election because people are really upset about this. So the fact that a lot of these government jobs are quote unquote green jobs, or trying to, again, it's another inflated area where the government's trying to force demand in a sector that just isn't ready. It's not developed. And look, we're all supportive of innovation at Independent Women's Forum, and we want to have clean air. But the fact of the matter is that the United States is actually reducing its emissions. The problem here is China. And so all of these Europeans getting together for their climate summit right now, and developed countries, there's the elephant not in the room. It's China is never going to actually do something that it doesn't want to do. And so we are, meanwhile, committing economic suicide through all these Green New Deal projects and hiring. And I want to point out another metric that might be useful for you guys to understand about inflation. So you put up that number about the inflation 3.14. Well, a number that's actually more accurate is called the median CPI, the median consumer price index. That is actually 5.24, much higher than the 3.14. And why the median CPI is so significant is that it basically is the median, it's the 50th percentile. It's sort of that market basket of goods that is more normal. It throws out the more extremes, low or high, and puts it to be the more typical use or basket of goods that people consume. And so that is much higher. It's 5.24%. That is a big part of why the inflation is higher than it seems nominally, which again, Joe Biden is trying to crow about the nominal CPI, but the median CPI tells a much different story.
Well, in the face of all this inflation, at least they've stopped printing unbacked currency by the trillion, haven't they, Carrie?
Well, there's still a lot on the books, and they are, and the Fed has said that they want to tamper. They don't want, and they also don't want to raise the rates anymore. That's the goal. But it's so high to the point where you talked about people being less poor than they were 3 years ago. You're spot on. And the Committee to Unleash Prosperity had a great report about this from E.J. Antoni. He reported that the value of your average 401k plan has fell by 16 $15,000. And then once you layer on the loss of inflation, that it's a combined loss of $33,000 or 25%. So this hits retirees who are living on fixed income the most. And so that's where I hope that people will look at what's happening and say, I'm going to vote for change. I'm going to vote for something different at a policy level.